So the symposia that we're going to have right now are going to be a series of 15-minute talks from different institutions, and all of these were selected from a competitive process. And the topic and the common theme for this particular session is innovative approaches and issues related to teaching curriculum. And so the way this will go is we're going to give each group or individual about 12 to 15 minutes per talk, and the way it's set up, we're going to bring all of them back up for a podium Q&A session. We're running about 10 minutes behind, and so we're just going to adjust the schedule as it goes. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Melinda Solomon from Louisiana State University. So I'll turn it over to you, Melinda.
I think you took my notes. Thank you. Good afternoon. Officially, my time is up, so this is going to be a really easy presentation. When I first saw the program, I thought that I wasn't really sure that the best way to set the table for a series of papers on innovation and quality instruction in undergraduate programs was to talk about cheating. And so I don't want to be a downer, and if I had it to do over again, I would retitle my paper to read Promoting Academic Integrity as a more positive note. We have societal perceptions about cheating. There are adages that I certainly heard about 1,000 times when I was a child, and you probably did too. Winners never cheat, cheaters never win. Once a cheater, always a cheater. There have been many recent incidences over the past decade of cheating in sport, and we're all familiar with the process of cutting corners to save time or maybe skirting the rules a little bit. So sometimes the line between optimizing the situation and cheating can become blurred. So one premise of my talk today is going to be that if we set the stage right, maybe once a cheater doesn't mean always a cheater, and that people can change in the right environment. We're concerned about academic dishonesty because it's perceived to be a widespread problem. How many students actually cheat? That's very difficult to ascertain because you're asking people who cheat to be honest and report it. So, you got to interpret it a little bit cautiously, but estimates are that on most campuses, approximately 75% of student surveys will admit that they have cheated in some form. Perhaps even more concerning is that about half the students surveyed in some studies indicate that they really don't think that cheating is all that wrong. And the perception we have is that cheating is on the rise. So is cheating wrong, or is it just being smart and being efficient? Students and everybody operate under a time crunch. There's pressure to attain very high grades for admission to professional schools. And technology, as the speaker before pointed out, puts a lot of information at your fingertips, makes things very easy, and the potential for its misuse is very high. The perception also is that the cheating in online courses is problematic, and that it's a lot easier to cheat in an online course than it is in a face-to-face venue. The reality, according to the surveys, is that you can cheat just as effectively in both settings, and that online cheating actually may be a little bit less. So it's not the format, it's the stage that we set. So there are many kinds of academic dishonesty. Most institutions, if not all, have documentation, student code of conduct, faculty handbook, policies on academic dishonesty, and the list of specific behaviors, just for clarity, is very long. But I'm kind of focusing around 4 types: falsifying or copying assignments, plagiarism, cheating on tests and exams, and a problem that we've had recently at LSU, which is distributing or posting copies of exams on places like Quizlet. After reading a little bit in preparation, because I've entered the world of undergraduate instruction for the first time in a decade, I decided I would see how much in touch the data were with the students that I have in my class. So I had a very informal survey and asked them to rate their perception of the prevalence of their peers, how many of them cheated on homework, et cetera, whether they had ever cheated in these 4 categories that I just mentioned, and to rate the seriousness on a scale of 1 to 10 of the infractions. 1 being it's not serious, it's just being smart, and 10 was it's very serious and should be penalized. So this was kind of surprising to me. It was anonymous, face down, and I try to create a very comfortable environment, but 85% of the students, 35 out of 41, did say they had engaged in academic dishonesty in some form. Most of it was falsifying homework assignments, and generally, they think their peers cheat more often than they actually report that they do. I would like to point out that no student in my class has ever plagiarized. And later, I'm going to tell you that's because they don't know what it is. So anyway, so why would people cheat? It can be characterized on a decisional balance of a cost-benefit ratio. Benefits are fairly self-evident. It might take less time to cheat, although we found some people put a lot of effort into it. You can get higher grades, and it can lower your stress level to be more efficient in your work, even though it's not your work. The cost is the risk of detection and the consequences that might occur above if you are detected. Kind of the point of my talk is that on the benefits of cheating and tipping toward the cheating side of the reasons to cheat, some of that is social perceptions of social norm, that everyone cheats, it's okay, I've got to cheat to stay on level ground. But to tip things back over on the cost side to lower the incidence of cheating or the desire to cheat the cost is also one of personal integrity. So with regard to potential cost, it doesn't appear that enforcement of academic integrity standards goes very well. Estimates are that about 2% of academic dishonesty is reported. Some of this lies on the shoulders of faculty who are sometimes characterized as naive. And I have a couple of people that I love dearly, but they just don't get it. They would never cheat, so they think their students are not going to cheat. Also, sometimes faculty are not vigilant, they're busy with other things, they're naive, and they don't pay enough attention. But when they suspect students of cheating, and I've had this experience, they're often reluctant to report it. Some of it is, I don't want to fool with it, and I've been there. And some of it is they don't think that, it wasn't really serious and they don't want to hurt the student. So there's reluctance to report. Also, sometimes the severity of the consequences is fairly low or perceived to be fairly low. We have academic hearings and students are involved in the process, and a lot of times faculty are irritated that there was no penalty for a student that they know cheated. So as we think about the central concerns that I have for the presentation or the message I want to send, when we talk about promoting academic integrity, one aspect of importance is fostering character development and professionalism. And another thing is that we as faculty and administrators have a responsibility to provide a level playing field for students who are honest and do not cheat. So the presentation before was very interesting because, a lot of concepts are the same, just the mechanisms are different. We have old-fashioned cheating when we didn't have technology, which I was in school with people who bought papers or recycled papers. Generally, I'm a fan of recycling, but not when it comes to academic work. And people cheated on exams by looking across the aisle at the nearest paper, bringing a cheat sheet. I know at LSU we went through a process of eliminating baseball caps during tests because people wrote answers on their bills, and stealing or circulating copies of exams. Sororities and fraternities were infamous for having a test bank. If we move into this century with technological advances, principles are the same. Internet sites enable cutting and pasting and very easily and posting exam materials like Quizlet, which we have had a problem with at LSU. And smart technologies are very sophisticated forms of cheat sheets, as in phones and watches. So I want to move toward ways that we can make cheating a worse choice for students. One is that there are commercially available programs that detect plagiarism. And my university has Turnitin. It's available readily. It's on the course management system. You can have people turn in their papers to the Turnitin Dropbox, and it will check and scan for plagiarism, and it will identify it. This can be used as a teaching tool. If you, at LSU, you can allow your students to check Turnitin before they turn it in. And the reason I said we don't think students know, a colleague of mine has a class of about 160. They turned in their first lab assignment, and 87 of them plagiarized. But they don't think it's plagiarism because they think if you change however to although, you have changed the whole paragraph. So it doesn't really work that way. In exam administration, we have moved to a situation where I'm sure people have said no phones for a long time. We now make students take their watches off. I have a smartwatch. Even I could cheat on my watch. So large classes, we have to check IDs. It's in close quarters when our classes are full, and I'm sure y'all's are. You can't spread kids out to take exams, so using multiple forms is a pretty simple way. And I've had to work with some of my newer faculty who think that they can pass out a test and leave a graduate student in there and not proctor. And so this is, I give my test like this. So, and being careful about test security. There are also secure sites for exams, and we have a large computer-based testing center, and for expense to decrease cheating and all kinds of things, I require any class at more than 80 students to the tests to be in the testing center. It helps your copy bill. But they have to turn in their phones before they go in there, and they have randomized testing so that no student gets the same test. They get the same questions, they just change the order. And for online testing, there are secure environments, and one of them is ProctorU. So going back to my students at LSU and our survey, I also had an open-ended question on my very informal survey that what's going to stop you from cheating, or how can you discourage your peers from cheating? The number one answer was enforce the consequences that we have. But they had some pretty insightful things. One is that we need to we need to work a little bit harder, and we need to quit using the same tests over and over again, the same assignments over and over again. That we need to make changes. They also recommend we use Turnitin, which we do. But a lot of people at LSU don't even know what it is, and I don't think the university has always done a good job of marketing this to faculty and encouraging them to use it. I'm getting to know my students. The semester just started, but I was pretty pleased with some of their insightful answers. Some of them said, you need to put less emphasis on stupid tests and more on learning, that you need to provide the support that students need, that you will provide the support they need so that they will feel more confident, and that we should teach professionalism and make students feel that we feel that it's important for them to learn and not just answer questions on a test. And consistent with literature, they recommended educational seminars about academic integrity. So one positive strategy is to educate students. The literature recommends that this happens in freshman orientation or first year experience, that this is treated as a serious issue, and you begin to try to set the culture that this is unacceptable. And faculty and administration need to be involved in this. Had another new faculty member in the fall. Student cheated, she handled it wrong. You just can't give them a 0, it's against the rules. So we need to, some faculty don't want to hear it, but we all need to be involved in this. So faculty need to be encouraged to be vigilant, to know that some students maybe tend toward cheating. But we also need to be aware that the way that we teach, the pedagogies that we use, particularly in assessment, can influence whether or not students feel compelled to cheat or not. And it's important that we communicate with students about this issue and other issues and develop relationships with them to discourage cheating. So Again, I probably should have changed all my slides to say strategies to promote academic integrity. We also need to work in our universities and departments to create social norms that stress value of honesty, ethical behavior, and integrity, that value learning and discussion and professionalism. And there is some evidence that when honor codes are implemented as they should be and have student involvement, that can lessen the incidence of academic dishonesty. So my conclusion to try to set the table for talking about quality instruction is that quality instruction and authentic learning experiences can promote a sound foundation to promote academic integrity. So there's my tiger.
So the question and what I hope to get across with you this afternoon is I want to talk about accreditation through the Committee on Accreditation for Exercise Sciences. Of course, this is a committee within CAHEP, and there's been a real move in recent years to try to get more exercise science, kinesiology type programs accredited. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the purported benefits of this. Maybe you're in a process of considering doing this yourselves. I can give you some of the ups and some of the downs, and hopefully give you a little bit more information moving forward. The American College of Sports Medicine has been actively pursuing this and promoting it. They want more programs to become COAES accredited. Their idea is that they want to try to promote academic leadership for the exercise sciences. Now, one of the things that I think we face, one of the challenges that I think we face if we've got a program that's trying to prepare students to work in exercise and fitness related fields is we don't really have a set of guidelines necessarily. Just out of curiosity, and I think I'm prepared for what I'm going to see here. How many of you currently work in programs that are COAES accredited? I see one hand, I see two. I think I saw three go up, so thanks. Yeah, again, not really much of a surprise, and as you're going to see from the actual numbers here, that's going to be pretty consistent. William Cole is the current director of COAES. I won't read all of this for you, of course, but I'd like to highlight a couple of points for you. They initiated it with the intention of trying to guide programs to embrace the gold standard of what they believe should be a gold standard for exercise science education. He goes on to tie this in with the healthcare system in the U.S. being an ever-changing landscape right now. In order to try to be more proactive and be on the cutting edge, perhaps accreditation can play a major role in this and can kind of set the direction a little bit. Again, as far as when this is going to happen is anybody's guess. Nevertheless, to try to raise the bar for exercise science education to meet what he considers to be the inevitable need. According to the Committee on the Accreditation for Exercise Sciences, currently, the number of accredited programs nationwide showed an increase from 2016 to 2017 from 52 to 84. They estimate that there are approximately, probably just over 550 exercise science programs in the United States. They don't give a clear definition of that, so therefore I think you can probably question that number of 550. Their goal is to have greater than 50% of those programs accredited by COAES by 2020 in order to allow, again, set more guidelines as far as sitting for a national credentialing exam. Now, I looked through their webpage, I looked through as much information as I could. I never found what they consider to be the national credentialing exam right now. We can assume that it's ACM because they're working so closely with them, but certainly you could probably include NSCA, you might put ACE in there. I'm not sure what that exam is, and honestly, I'm not so sure they know what it is either. It sounds official. Believe me, when I talk about our program, when I'm talking to parents, anything on our literature, on our webpage, any brochures we send out, we write front and center, hey, we are a COAES accredited program. We hope that sounds good to people. But as we just witnessed right here, many colleges and universities across the U.S., you're doing just fine, aren't you? Without this accreditation. You've got students, your students are probably going on and being successful as far as getting into graduate programs and getting some jobs in the health and fitness related fields. The self-study process itself can be time-consuming, a bit costly. This trend continues once you're accredited. You've got to pay these annual fees. How much does it cost? In 2012, we went through and did the self-study process. For me to submit that self-study, they weren't going to accept that unless I included that check for $500 with it, so there was that fee. The site visit expense, of course, ran about $1,500, and then each year we've got to pay an annual institutional fee along with the accreditation fee. And then finally, you've got a continuing accreditation fee. That's a report that you submit along with focused site visit expenses, which will be coming up. So grand total, we've spent just over $10,000 over the past 5 years in order to become accredited and then to maintain the accreditation with the annual reports. But here's the rub. Currently, if you are a student, a high school student in Wisconsin, you've got a lot to choose from. Within the UW system, high school students who want to study kinesiology and/or exercise science have a lot of different options. The list, of course, includes Eau Claire, La Crosse, Madison. I've got a colleague here from Milwaukee, Platteville, River Falls, Stevens Point, and Whitewater, and Oshkosh. All have a major, a minor, or an emphasis that will allow a student to work in this field if they want to. As I've mentioned, within the system, we're the only accredited program. Again, that's yay for us, and I scream that from the rooftops as frequently as I can. But the bottom line is we're competing with other UW system schools. Now, I have no illusions here. I think for a 17 or 18-year-old high school student trying to decide what college they're going to go to, I really doubt that the tipping point for them is going to be, hey, did you know that Oshkosh has this COAES accredited program? I get it. That's probably not going to draw them in necessarily. However, what I hope is that we can perhaps get parents and guidance counselors to buy into that was one of the things I try to shoot for. The trend in kinesiology is toward accreditation, or is it? Due to our status, a kinesiology graduate from Oshkosh, with our emphasis, is able to take the ACSM exam at a pretty significant discount. It costs $349 if you're a non-member. If you're a student from our program, you can take it for $210. So that's a pretty decent break. Our belief is that this discount has prompted more of our students to actually pursue ACSM certification. My wife is an athletic trainer, and it has bothered me for years that a student who's in athletic training, well, they can't practice as an athletic trainer unless they're certified. And that's not the case with us, and I've always thought that's a bit problematic. And as you well know, go to any local health club, they can put that personal trainer sign on their shirt by saying they played high school football. Not knocking the high school football player, but as far as their background in training, it can be quite suspect. A few statistics for you based on our most recent annual report. About 83% of our graduates were either employed within 1 year of graduation in a fitness-related field, or they'd entered some type of a graduate program, exercise science, cardiac rehab. Again, I'm sure you're experiencing a number of our students are now going into OT and PT, and kinesiology has become a pretty consistent avenue for them. I mentioned the thing about parents or guidance counselors hopefully having some influence as far as helping them to decide when comparing kinesiology programs within the state of Wisconsin. My hope is that gives us a bit of an edge, potentially resonates with parents along with the high school guidance counselors. This past year, if you look at our 3 graduation endpoints, 68 students graduated with a degree in kinesiology with an emphasis in exercise and fitness. I like to believe that if our program was not accredited, we maybe would have had fewer students in the program to begin with. So I like to think those numbers are fairly important. I like to believe it lends some credibility to the major and the emphasis. And again, gives us some type of a distinction. For the last 5 years, the UW system saw some pretty significant declines in enrollment. I'm happy to report that kinesiology was able to maintain. We showed exponential growth from about 2009 to about 2012, and then it leveled off pretty significantly. But at that time, leveling off was a whole lot better than declining. And so with all of that, I thought it played in our favor. It allowed us to bring in some outside experts, the site visitors, give us a good critical look at our curriculum. No emotional attachment. Hey, here's a course you might want to consider dropping. It doesn't really fit in with these standards. forced us to collect a lot more data on our students that we would not have done otherwise. Specifically, our graduate and our employer surveys have been very useful for us. We've gotten some great information from that. More current and I think efficient curriculum. Met our departmental goal of having nationally accredited, recognized academic programs. We only work with undergrads. We've got an athletic training program that obviously has to be accredited. Our strength and conditioning program is recognized through the National Strength and Conditioning Association. So it was very consistent with what we tried to do as a department. Yeah, but late fall, Wisconsin, you know, it can be a beautiful state and a beautiful place to live, but there are just some things that are beyond our control. I don't know what this date means to you, October 15th, 2017. I know what it meant to me. As I was sitting down in my recliner to enjoy a good Sunday, watching the Packers take on the Vikings, and we had to witness this, which for all intents and purposes basically ended the season for the Green Bay Packers and allowed the Minnesota Vikings to therefore win the division and fortunately lose last week. Now you're wondering, what is this? This doesn't really tie in. What are you talking about? Well, late fall was also the time when on November 8th, I was informed by our acting dean that they would no longer support our accreditation status with COAES. In fact, unless it was an academic program where accreditation was required, such as athletic training, social work, there of course are others, that she would no longer support that. So therefore, our accreditation is now set to expire in May of 2018. We have some choices here. We've not been forbidden from continuing our accreditation. We have a departmental budget. Oh, it's just enormous. Which if we really wanted to continue with our accreditation status, we likely could. We are actually having a pretty serious discussion about whether we're going to do it or not. Do we want to spend part of our very small S&E budget in order to maintain the accreditation? At this point, it's not looking very good. So therefore, I thought I should end with, as of May, I will be known as the former program director of a COAES accredited exercise and fitness emphasis. I do want to say, if you're going to ask me the question, is this a good idea or a bad idea, I would tell you it's a good idea. I'm disappointed that after I had submitted the proposal to do this presentation, I was then informed that, oh, by the way, you're not going to be anymore. With that said, I do think that as a profession, this is something that needs to move forward, and I think these are steps in the right direction, but clearly not everyone is buying into that. Clearly not everyone is buying into that, and so you can question whether or not this is something we need to do or not. So, all right, thanks.
Our next presentation is going to be by two speakers from Auburn University, Melissa Pangilina and Mary Rudisell.
That's good.
Did I get it right?
Yeah, that was good. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Melissa and I are here to talk about enhancing student learning and research through community-engaged scholarship. We are advocates of this approach because we feel like our students at Auburn are really getting some great experiences and opportunities. So here's an overview, if I can figure out how to... Here's an overview of what we'll be covering today. We'll start out by discussing what community-engaged scholarship is. We'll also talk about how communities can support it. And then Melissa is going to present some examples of engaged scholarship across 3 developmental periods and 3 domains within kinesiology to highlight these programs' impact on undergraduate education, our research, and community objectives. So, what is community-engaged scholarship? It is a collaboration between community stakeholders and universities to create research programs that address the needs or disparities in health, in education, and other critical services. Community stakeholders provide critical insight to help direct our research. So an example would be they provide us insight on things like what their priorities are, What are specific barriers and facilitators in their own community setting, and also provide programs and approaches that they've already attempted to see what has worked and hasn't worked. This process with the community stakeholders can really validate the significance or need for our programs and their implementation within their community setting. So the community brings a lot to the table. What they bring are real-world problems that really need to be addressed with potential broad impacts. They also provide diverse populations. On the other side, we know a lot of the benefits that come for our community stakeholders from universities, and it's typically in human and financial resources. So we have large numbers of curious, intellectual, hard-working faculty and students and staff that are really committed to going out and doing this work. In fact, our students really are hungry to do these kinds of activities. It helps them to be competitive when they go out into the real world, whatever their direction is. I have here state-of-the-art facilities. I'm careful there because I know some folks don't feel that way, but compared to our community partners, we have really, really great facilities and a lot of equipment that we can share in these experiences. We also have access to intramural and extramural grants that can many times be much larger than our local budgets. And then also we have ability to translate scientific research into community outcomes. So there are three different kinds of types of research that kind of come out of this work: epidemiological or descriptive studies aimed at determining the community characteristics, their needs, and available resources. There's also evidence-based practice aimed at implementing an evaluated program, policy, or a treatment in the community. And also we have practice-based evidence aimed to evaluate the efficacy of a community program using scientific method. So all of these types of opportunities of community-engaged scholarship our undergraduate students are involved in. Our students have then unique opportunities to develop qualitative and quantitative skills while making a big difference in the lives of our community members. I should mention that Auburn is a land grant, so this is really part of our big mission. So what can universities do to kind of support this work? Funding is helpful, it's not necessary, but there are some smart ways to leverage resources beyond funding. At Auburn, we do have some really great opportunities in terms of internal grant support for community-engaged scholarship. We also recognize faculty for the outstanding work by giving them awards if they're doing quality outreach that is resulting in positive outcomes. So recognition for faculty validates and promotes continued engagement, and the funding provides a mechanism to implement these programs and offer opportunities for community match. Melissa, who will be speaking, Melissa's been a star at this, and she's also been an award winner in our college for doing these kinds of work. She's very good at getting community match. Programs aimed at supporting undergraduate research may be leveraged to further support students to participate in this kind of work. At Auburn, we do have mini grants that help faculty to improve research training and also student learning outcomes. We also have fellowships that allow students to investigate research questions of their own interest, and many times this might be embedded in one of these community programs. So I should mention, if your university really doesn't provide these kinds of supports with funding, it might be a wise idea to go back and really advocate for it. Then the last couple things I want to talk about are buy-in, basically buy-in from upper administration. Kind of talked a little bit about that with funding opportunities. Your college and also your own unit are really critical in creating these kind of supportive environments for this kind of work. So example would be that at Auburn, we have great funding opportunities, but we also are required to match those, when we get outreach grants, there is a match either from the college or from the department. And so it really requires us then to invest a little bit into this kind of work. So buy-in is critically important at your unit level. Also, we have faculty and merit evaluations each year, and for Auburn, we include allocations of time to scholarly outreach with expected measurable outcomes, so our faculty members can really get salary increases by doing work in the community that is resulting in positive things. We also support travel to conferences and workshops where they're really promoting and talking about community engaged scholarship, because we really feel like it's critically important that our faculty, one, get connected to these people so they could be future or potential collaborators, but also learn best practices so that we can be incredibly efficient. And these examples do help to develop a culture of and value of community engaged scholarship within the unit, which translates into additional student opportunities in our classrooms and in our laboratories. So then the last thing I want to mention before I turn it over to Melissa is that at the school level, we really have worked very hard in trying to promote this kind of work. We have created a number of courses that really facilitate student involvement in community engaged scholarship. We have also partnered with other departments, programs, and student organizations when developing and creating these community programs. And these practices have really helped us to create a sustainable learning opportunities within our unit. It's broadened the scope of the student involvement across units, and it has allowed students then to lead community programs and develop new career pathways. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, who I don't see anywhere in the room. Oh, there you are.
Hi.
And let her talk about some of the programs that we're working with at Auburn.
May I flip this slide? What? That's what Mary just talked about. So I'm going to try to stay on script because I have a tendency of going overboard when we talk about these different opportunities. So today I'm going to showcase 3 different examples that cover different silos within kinesiology. We're going to first start with exercise physiology, we're going to talk a little bit about rehabilitation sciences, and then we're going to end with motor development, which is Mary and my heart. Each of these different levels will discuss different types of community partnerships that can start at the university and then build into the community. So the first example I'll showcase is a program that's actually run on campus and has been running for the last 20 years. And it's considered to be a university program. But through our engagement with the community, we've been able to elaborate our program and offerings so that community members can partake. So this is an example of how an epidemiological study in our community identified a need that needed to be met, and how we can then use evidence-based practices to determine which is the most appropriate intervention and approach for our community. So Tiger Fit was developed to address this health disparity in exercise and physical health. We received funding from Blue Cross Blue Shield that had the goal of further expansion into the community and eventually into our hospitals. And with respect to our community outcomes, our community members received full exercise assessments, including DEXA scans. They also received personalized exercise prescriptions for free, and all of this was run through a partnership with our faculty and our students. With respect to our faculty outcomes, our faculty were able to identify and study exercise adherence and motivation and determine the factors that were limiting or barriers that were present in our community. Now, Alabama is consistently one of the lowest fit states in the country, and in our rural area, there are definitely important barriers that need to be addressed. As far as our student learning outcomes, since we are interested in enhancing student learning, our students were able to really understand assessment and exercise prescription in a diverse community and a diverse population. Oftentimes in our exercise physiology labs, we're testing each other. There's not a lot to be gained from that kind of experience. In fact, a lot of these exercise opportunities have better prepared our students for certification exams, given them opportunities for health education and translational knowledge translation into community members, and helped develop relevant job skills. We also created a pathway for student interns to work in the community, working in cardiac rehabilitation clinics, fitness facilities, and community health programs. Our students are able to evaluate data, write reports, and then determine the success of their exercise prescriptions. Our next steps are to move from the community with the barriers that we see with respect to transportation by creating a mobile unit that can travel to rural communities as well as to our local community. And that way individuals from the community don't have to be transported to Auburn University, and there is a bit of a barrier when people come onto the university campus. We've also partnered with our local community to try to replicate what we're doing with TigerFit at the hospitals and at the more convenient locations like our community centers. Importantly, we'd like our graduates to actually work at those centers. The next example I have is pretty close to my heart. We developed a Handwriting Without Tears program, which showcased a further level of community engagement. The parents of previous programs that I've run expressed a need that as their kids are getting ready for school, they're ill-prepared to be able to deal with the rigors of handwriting. And there were no community programs in our area that were able to help individuals with disabilities to gain those fine motor skills. So I contacted another parent that I knew who was a handwriting specialist, and she and I worked together to adapt the Handwriting Without Tears program so that undergraduates and graduate students could actually administer the program. So this is an example of practice-based evidence. So in our community, very few elementary teachers actually teach handwriting in schools, and we also lack a lot of OT services in session. Parents have to pay a lot of money out of pocket, and there are often large wait lists for parents to get in to get OT services. For our program, parents paid $10 for 1.5-hour sessions to work one-on-one with their child and undergraduate student that was trained in the Handwriting Without Tears program. The fees went to pay for just the materials and to compensate our handwriting specialist. With respect to our community outcomes, our participants saw tremendous improvements overall. One parent told me that her 2 children that participated in the program, one with autism and one that was typically developing, showed greater improvements in our 10-week student-led program than they had in 2 years of OT services and at 1/5 of the cost. With respect to our faculty outcome, we're currently writing a practitioner paper to show how this program can be implemented at other universities and within community settings like schools or within parent programs. More importantly, we're publishing the results of these studies with 3 undergraduate students that have assisted with the data collection, data analysis, and banished to publication. Beyond these outcomes, students learned how to develop materials for teachers and parents to take home and to continue working with their children and their students. We developed a lot of skills in assessment and intervention for individuals with disabilities, and they gained important data analysis and data presentation skills. So we have opportunities for undergraduates to present their data at an undergraduate research fair. For me, the most important outcome was that of the 22 students that participated in this program, all of them got their first choice graduate schools or jobs upon graduation. Our next step is to partner with our local schools and parent groups so that our students can actually teach the teachers and teach the parents. And that way they can continue without the same kind of overhead and costs, which can be a rate limiter for some of the participants. So we really do think that it's important that we break down some of those barriers, particularly financial. My last example is a program where Dr. Rudisill has wrangled a bunch of researchers together to engage in a further level of community engagement. In this case, evidence-based practices were used to promote motor skill, physical activity, and cognitive functions in children using an autonomy-supported movement intervention. This intervention actually took place at the Head Start Center, and Mary keeps getting us to come back year after year. The Head Start administrators actually contacted Dr. Rudisill because there was a great need in their programs to provide structured motor skill training to their preschool children. Dr. Rudisill used best practices from her previous research and that of others in this room to develop an appropriate program to target children from low-income families. As far as our community outcomes are concerned, a lot of the work that we had with the Head Start program not only provided opportunities for structured motor skill training, but parents received reports from our pre and post-test assessments from our research with respect to their motor skills, their children's health, and their cognitive functions. In addition, Head Start receives federal funding for all of the visitors and interactions that we have, so that everything that we do to pour into their program goes back to them in the end. With respect to our faculty outcomes, we are sitting on a mountain of data, which we hope to wrangle into a couple different big external funds, so that can just lead to more opportunities for undergraduate students to participate and be part of this unique program. Our undergraduate students have learned many different insights about the barriers and facilitators to doing this work appropriately embedded within the school community. In the future, our work is really geared at reducing some of those barriers so that teachers can implement the programs themselves. So for example, we're creating guides and manuals to help deal with weather and things like bees and all kinds of things like dragging equipment onto the playground. Our goal is to develop a program so that there's a curriculum for parents and teachers to engage together so that we can continue to support this Head Start program even once we leave. So to wrap everything up, Community Engaged Scholarship is really an excellent way to expand research opportunities for both faculty and for students. Our student outcomes are critically important in helping us to motivate us to be involved in applied research. And it also facilitates knowledge translation and skills that wouldn't be possible without this community engagement. Our ultimate goal, beyond our faculty and student outcomes, is that we can scale our programs so that we may implement our research with larger populations and have a greater impact that might lead to policy changes to reduce health and educational disparities in our community. So I want to end and just say thank you for your attention, and we want to acknowledge our support.
Thank you very much for having us. And what Megan and I hope to do today, we're the coordinators of the kinesiology program in Oregon State, is to kind of use our experiences over the past 4 years as a case study in what to do, but sometimes what not to do when switching from really have experiential learning being something that students seek out and can do to supplement their curriculum to making a requirement of your program. And so really, hopefully over the next 15 minutes, really talk about some ideas that we can, or you may be able to use to create not just experiential learning opportunities, but ones that are meaningful and also diverse. And I think that goes beyond just having them check a box that they've completed it to something that can add value as they seek employment or go on into further educational opportunities. But then just as importantly, when you go and try to do that, especially in a very large program, how do you manage that requirement of all students and not let that be sort of a pinch point that deters their graduation? And so how do you, as a program, think about doing that with everything else you need to do? So I think the first thing we needed to think about, and we probably thought about it too late, is who are we as a program if we're going to try to implement this, this requirement? And so as you can see, as a kinesiology program, yes, we have a Bachelor's of Science in Kinesiology, a large one with almost 1,200 undergraduate students. But as a faculty, we're also spread across doing other programs, whether it's PhD and Master's in Kinesiology. We have a accredited athletic training program, a Master's of Adaptive Physical Education. We have an MPH option in physical activity coming on. Our faculty deliver essentially the health and wellness of the entire university. And so we can't just have our entire focus on undergrad and lose sight that we have these other requirements and obligations as faculty that really limit some of our time. Specific to the undergraduate program, we also want to look at what is the makeup of our students. And what we really see is that we are one of the largest majors in our college. We represent about 46% of all the undergraduate students in the college, but then we have probably many students in the major that look different, but we have one specific subgroup, which is our pre-therapy and allied health students. These are the ones that many of us have that are interested in pre-physical therapy, occupational therapy, athletic training, pre-med school, and they desire things that are different than some of the general kinesiology students. And we have oftentimes in the past served them better in terms of experiential learning than we have the majority of our other kinesiology students. We also need to recognize where we are. So Corvallis is a town of only 50,000 people, primarily a university town. And then geographically, we're somewhat isolated. And the next largest places will be Salem and Eugene. That's an hour drive. Portland's 2 hours away with a lot of universities. And so if we're putting people out into the community, we really need to pay attention of what is actually feasible in terms of the amount of locations that we have, that what can we require of our students. And so we built it on the back of this idea of trying to create a meaningful experience by having this thread of experiential learning. So we touch on them very early in year one. All of them are required to take an intro to kinesiology class, and I'm sure many of you have, but we very early introduced the idea of getting out in the community and touching base. For the ones who are interested in pre-therapy allied health, they have a separate course they can take that introduces them to professionals in the region and try to basically connect them early for what could be sort of voluntary observational experiences. We lose them at the current moment until year 3, and Megan will touch on this just from a management perspective, is we don't see them again formally until year 3 when they do either a pre-internship seminar or a similar thing on the allied health option. And really, this is our way to say, before we send you out in the community to represent us, we need to teach you some things about professionalism, resume development, interviewing skills. What are the professional soft skills you need before you can go out and actually represent us? And some students it works better than others, but we do our best to try to get those soft skills across. In the context of our curriculum, I'll bear in mind this is only a 1-credit course. And so I think we have opportunities for improvement. And then in year 3 or 4, depending upon where they are, they have really a practicum that they can take, and that is different than the kind of title of the allied health practicum. Really, that's just the setting they go into. But in keeping this idea of diversity, and I think it segues nicely into what we heard this morning about millennials wanting choices or Gen Zers wanting choices, we also have sort of expanded what we determine to be experiential learning to include not just formal work experiences, but are they doing research and scholarship with us in our labs? Are they doing research projects? Are they doing study abroad as counting as experiential learning? Are they doing full-on undergraduate honors theses? And all of these to us are experiential learning that can fulfill the requirement. But as we do this, we have 1,200 undergraduate students. We're spread across all of these programs. We're in a small town that's relatively isolated. And very quickly, when we decided to implement this, we ended up here and said, how in the world can we effectively manage this?
All right, so I'm going to take on discussing how we've managed it and how we're planning to manage it in the future as well. So Mark and I were discussing this in 2013, not 2014. Our kinesiology faculty wholeheartedly decided that we wanted all kinesiology students to have this opportunity for experiential learning. So with some of the tracks that were in kinesiology, including the pre-therapy and allied health track, we had some students that had a really direct path to getting these experiences. But some students weren't necessarily getting these hands-on experiences at the time. So it also aligned really nicely at the university level. We had a blueprint for undergraduate success, and this was something that while we were making these decisions, the university said, we want all of our students to have personal touches or this hands-on experience within OSU and beyond Oregon State University. So this is a part of our structure. At Oregon State University and within our program, we have central advising. We're within a College of Public Health and Human Sciences, and every single kinesiology student has an advisor. So faculty don't have undergraduate student advising as a part of their load. So our undergraduate advisors were really helpful with us in terms of implementing this experiential learning credit or credits as a part of a student's program of study. What they find as well is that they see students early on in their careers. They create these programs that they're intended to go through for their degree program, and they're meant to be flexible, but students are just kind of checking them often along the way. So experiential learning for some students ended up being a check within this program of study. So we also talked about, okay, how are we going to administer this experiential learning? So as Mark indicated, we have a number of faculty within our program, but we didn't necessarily assign effort to all faculty in respect to managing this experiential learning. We had some faculty who already had a little bit of this effort built in, but it was really intended for specific tracks. So we had one faculty who had it built in specifically for fitness, strength and conditioning. We had another faculty who had it built in a little bit specifically for that pre-therapy and allied health track. But then we had all of these other students all of a sudden who had this experiential learning credit that they had to have as well. So there were some unintended consequences to faculty at the time. I was one of them. These are some of the pictures from some of the adaptive physical activity programs that we have at the university, which is a service program that we run and a part of service, but all of a sudden, in addition to overseeing this community-based program as a part of service, I was also administering some paperwork for students who were doing this experiential learning. At the same time, administering paperwork wasn't exactly, or the students participating in the program was important, but we wanted them to have reflective experiences on this. We wanted them to go into these experiences, and we wanted these experiences to be meaningful. We had some students early on who were finding very meaningful experiences, but we also had some students who were coming up to us in their senior year. We're quartered at Oregon State University. Their spring term, they're about to graduate, and they need 3 experiential learning credits. And they haven't necessarily thought through what exactly they want that to be, what's important to them, and we're scrambling to make sure that they're graduating on time and gaining these experiences, but it's falling on a specific faculty, and that's not necessarily included in their effort. So in last year in the fall, we sat down and decided what do we need in order to run this properly to serve our students and also to make sure that they're really gaining these meaningful experiences that they wanted. So we put together a kinesiology internship coordinator position. We had a full search, and we were looking for a faculty who's going to ultimately, one faculty member who would administer all of these experiences. Faculty within the university or within our program had connections, but again, we didn't necessarily have the effort to kind of manage those connections within the community, but we wanted one central person where we could send students. But we were also looking for someone who had those clinical skills for those 278 students who were in the pre-therapy and allied health track, and then someone who also had really clear skills in kinesiology. And what we found, this was ultimately a failed search. We had excellent candidates that came to campus, but we couldn't find the combination of the two. Someone who has these very specific clinical skills and someone who also has these very specific kinesiology skills. Which leads us to this, hot off the presses. It was just cleared in HR this week. So we are now searching for a kinesiology experiential learning coordinator. So when we took a step back, we've actually made an internal decision that the pre-therapy and allied health track, we have some means to fulfill that experiential learning internally, but we're ultimately looking for someone to handle the experiential learning and all of those experiences for the rest of our kinesiology students, which is closer to 1,000. I should point out with central advising, when we initially told them that this was something that we wholeheartedly believed in, they were on board with us and wanted this to happen, but we had the head advisor quickly point out, I can't audit one class that ultimately tells us that every student has fulfilled this obligation. So for those students who are gaining that experience through a global experience or doing a term at another university, in part that counted, but we actually had to go through every single, or that advisor had to go through every single part of their degree program and sort of added on later that they had fulfilled this obligation that we had as a part of the degree program requirement. So we also see some future opportunities with this. So one, we're looking for that experiential learning coordinator right now. When we had the failed search, we came up with some creative means of handling it this way. This year, which ultimately meant that we had some faculty who stepped out of their more traditional roles and have taken on helping us out with experiential learning right now. But that's on a short-term basis. So we really are looking for a specific person who can help us grow it and own it and make those partnerships with the community, that the community and the sites have someone central that they can call when they have students at their site as well, and that continuity for all of those experiences. So our college has come up with what they're calling, it's a college-wide initiative, and it's being called an ARC. So as you'll notice earlier, and this is to get experiences early on, when Mark pointed out this thread that we have students really early on in their first year where we're giving them an introduction to kinesiology course and sort of giving them a lot of information at once that's really important, but we're missing out on that second, and sometimes we're not seeing them, we're seeing them sometime in their third or fourth year for some of these other classes. So they're often missing out on that experiential learning opportunity in their first and second year. So the ARC is really considered to be a plan of building skills and thinking about what you want that experience to be. And for example, if it was a research experience, maybe your first term or during your freshman year at some point, you have a chance to observe lab meetings. And a student could join onto your lab and get a credit. And this could be a part of that ARC without having very specific skill set or responsibilities, but just get a feel for what is involved in the research that they're going to be going into. So some of our take-home messages are to prepare students before they're going into those experiences, and that's a part of this ARC over the term of their degree program. That not all students, one unintended consequence of this was that not all students were getting that meaningful experience, and that was really important to us. So those students that were waiting until the final term of their senior year weren't necessarily getting what we were hoping they were going to get out of this experience. So making sure that it's meaningful and that there's a central contact person for someone to go see to leverage these experiences. And also that we're building these experiences in threads and capturing these experiences with students at multiple time points throughout their program of study and their degree program.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, at this time, we have about 10 minutes for some Q&A, and they'll still give us